But what is important to me is maximizing the time that I am independent. I love my freedom and independence. And so for that, you need...
Welcome for another episode of All Bets on Her today. Nice to see you, Jalal.
Pleasure, as always.
We have our very own, National Bank's very own, Tania Dietz joining us today.
Nice.
And she's sharing some stories of her money story of her early childhood and early in her career as somebody who's now in the industry. So she has some pretty interesting insights and looking at some patterns and behavior she picked up at a very early age. So coming up next.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Episode of All Bets on Her. I'm joined today with Tania Dietz with our practice management team at National Bank. Yeah. Tania, thanks for being here.
My pleasure. This will be fun.
Thanks for being brave to have this conversation is first off. As the whole genesis of why we're having these conversations is to really uncover just financial conversations with real women from all walks of life. And to understand by having these stories and being open about it, we can all learn from it. So Thank you.
My pleasure.
So a little bit of background about Tania. So Tania, you've been in the financial industry for over 25 years, 17 of which has been in the wealth management. Yeah. You are so passionate when it comes to the value of advice and client experience. It just resonates from you.
Yeah.
You also lead the Young Women Student Mentorship Program here.
I do.
That is you just see the joy when you're engaged on that level of mentorship, and I'm happy to be part of the program with you. But the way you bring the next generation of women into the wealth management industry it's a fabulous program. So I can't say enough about it, and I'm glad you take that up. But we're going to talk a little bit about your personal side today.
Yeah.
So you're 53 years old.
I am. Just turned 53.
You're single.
I am.
You have no children, but you have bonus children, which we'll get into in a moment. I really like that term, bonus children. So we're going to talk about that. But we want to start with a little bit about your background. So how did you get into the industry and, your experience around money? How has it shaped you?
First of all, I want to say thank you for inviting me, because my whole reason for being is all about adding value to people's lives. And if this can do that, then so be it. I'll share my story. I was born and raised in Montreal. I had I'll call it a life event early on in age. My mother was widowed at 36 years old. So I lost my father from a fatal heart attack at 37. It was 2 weeks before I was going to be 8 years old. My sister was 6, so we only had just over a year in between us. And I saw my mother, who was a teacher in a school, scramble, because she was not this is not something you plan for.
That's not something you plan for at that age.
And so she had to obviously get a second job and pretty much deal with her own emotions.
Right.
And she had 2 kids, 8 and 6 years old. So that was not easy for her. But what she taught me early on is be independent and focus on education. Don't rely on a man to make sure you're going to be okay.
Right.
And so from that age on, I focused a lot on my education and making sure that I would get a job to support myself.
Right.
And so that was really how I was raised through university. And your typical 20-year-old wanting to take on the world. And it was all about how much I was going to make, and I was going to, be lead on Wall Street, and I'm going places. Yeah. And so, what was important to me back then was, making sure I could support myself, but also it was all about, how much you made and what that meant.
Right.
And so, over time, I didn't really have a whole lot of money, so it wasn't thinking about who do I go to get advice around this. And my mother didn't have a financial advisor. And so for me, it was important to make sure that I had somebody to make sure that I'm maximizing my earnings at the same time. So to be honest, I'm not really sure how it came about. But I would say that I saved early on in the process to avoid this situation, and I tried to get as many scholarships.
Did you and your mom ever? I can see why that event would have shaped her as well as you. Have you later on in life? Have the two of you ever talked about that scenario around managing money together?
No, because my mother's a spender.
Yeah.
And she's always encouraged me, Tania, like, would you just spend your money, enjoy it?
Right.
But at the same time, she also told me as a kid, but she has also evolved as well. So she fell in love shortly thereafter. She believed in marriage and knew she would find somebody else.
Right.
Which gave us that stability. And my stepfather, who was an engineer and very organized and very analytic, more taught me about money, I would say, than my mother.
Right.
And interestingly enough, he also taught me the understanding of risk, because my mother used to play cards with us, and she taught us how to play poker one time. And we gambled, and so she had us put our allowance, and I lost, and I was devastated.
Yeah.
I was devastated that I lost money. And it was my stepfather that pulled me aside and said, Tania, and I remember this to this day, like we're going back a long time.
Yeah.
Because he met me when I was 10. And he said, if you don't want to lose your money, don't gamble. And to this day, I don't buy lotto tickets. It's so risk.
Interesting.
So I won't be seeing you at Fairview Casino then.
No.
You will not, Jalal. No,
but it's
absolutely.
really interesting, because can you imagine if you would have won the poker game, like how that event may have shaped it differently, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's kind of created an understanding also of risk reward, because I also worked with my financial advisor to make sure that I had a proper balance when it came to equities and fixed income or risk and higher risk.
Yeah, you understood.
So I needed some guidance around that.
Yeah.
And so that's how I came about. And I think when I got my first full-time job, that's when I started to look more closely to the importance of having somebody who knows what they're doing in this space.
That's so interesting.
It is.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, and this particular fellow who I dealt with back in the day was transactional based, and he tried to teach me about fee based. Which I think I ended up moving towards because I trusted him. Yeah. But in 2005, I mean, well, you already know my age, so I'm not going to age myself. I entered into the wealth management industry, and I was hired as a wholesaler to financial advisors based on my sales experience, not my knowledge about the industry. And so it's kind of enlightening for me to see different types of advisors and how they ran their business. Yeah. And it made me realize, like, this guy doesn't really do everything that I need. And sometimes you just assume that I don't have a choice. And in that period of time, I realized.
Well, it's important that you mention that, because it's finding that it sounded there was something missing, right? You didn't maybe know what was missing, but there wasn't something there. And our business is very interesting, because there's people from all walks of life that do the role that I do, but it's finding that right personality mix that fits with yours, right? That values align, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And this particular advisor that I ended up with when I started my first time job, he was young and he was eager and he was determined. And so that was important to me. I ended up moving towards an advisor that was mutual fund MFDA, Mutual Fund Dealer Association. So he couldn't sell stocks. And I didn't know that. I just liked the guy. He was one of my top clients. Like, who else am I going to go with? So I didn't necessarily know what I needed to know back then. And so I just, because he was a nice guy.
Yeah.
And so looking back, and when I moved off of him because I knew that I wanted more of a full service brokerage relationship, I thought through my decision making process a little differently.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too, because you mentioned that, and you were somebody that was familiar with the financial industry and things like that. Can you imagine folks that aren't in the day-to-day, like, do they know what MFDA stands for or all the licensing? It is very daunting. So to step in and figure out where do I go and who do I trust and who do I work with, that's a challenge in our industry.
Yes.
So it's kind of a little ironic. And so when we first started this episode, you said don't rely on a man for your money. Yeah. But then obviously sounds like the wealth advisor was a guy, right? I assume.
Yeah. Coincidentally.
So I just had a quick question though. Now obviously we having a wealth advisor is very important. But when you hired one, right? Whether it was your first one or second one, you probably weren't as versed in the financial world as you obviously are now. Did you just give them the reins completely 100%, or were you constantly trying to look up resources in terms of learning even on your own, even though having a wealth advisor, or even with having a wealth advisor, an individual, I think you'd agree with me, should understand, basically, like, let's just say how the markets work, how finances work, not just basically delegating absolutely and everything to them, right? Like working alongside with them. Like, what are some resources? Can you shed some light on that? Did you take the learning process a little more seriously than you should have, or whatever it is?
To be perfectly honest, I didn't get excited by researching stocks and such.
Right.
I was more interested in people and what mattered to them and adding value. And so early on in my, call it, investment experience, I just trusted it. If I had that inherent trust, I just like, you do your thing. But there could have been opportunities for me to be taken advantage of.
Right.
And so when I entered the full service brokerage industry, which is where you're at and where you've got more of a holistic view, less transaction, but more long-term relationship, my due diligence changed.
Right.
Okay.
And so that's really how I think my knowledge evolved.
Yeah.
I was also working with a 30-year veteran in the industry, and he helped me fine-tune, basically narrow down my scope.
Yeah.
And it was always very important for them to understand what was important to me.
Right.
So that was how I would say my relationship evolved. And now I still don't research the stock market because
it could get pretty boring.
I work vicariously through people like you to help you build your business and delight clients, which I'm really good at, delighting clients and sharing my passion.
Right.
But that was not something that was obvious to me in my 20s, 30s. Like, sometimes you just need more life experience to truly understand what matters most to you. And
I think you do a very good job at articulating that. And I'm sure you've learned that over time, is how do you articulate, and you've done a very good job. And I hope you can share a little bit around some of the planning you've done. Because as a single person, planning can be different. Oftentimes you'll read all the brochures and it talks about families and how you financial plan as a family. Yeah. But as a single person, it's a bit different. And you've done a really good job thinking through these scenarios and putting plans around it. And I thought that's a cool story that we should be telling.
Yes. Well, I think, and I coach my advisors about the idea that just because you're single doesn't mean that you don't need a financial advisor, or that there's something wrong with you. And so I just didn't meet the right person.
Right.
I was also terrified of having kids, so bless your soul.
Yeah. It is terrifying.
I did not feel like I had the ability, and so when I got approached about this whole idea of planning, it made sense to me because I'm a planner.
Right.
But I also have limited time. And so when this first advisor sent me a 45-page document to fill out, which included a budget.
45 pages.
45 pages
Fill this out.
via email. And it included a budget, which no.
Yeah.
And so it turned me off from the process off the bat. And so it wasn't until I came with my full service brokerage relationship that they talked about the importance of having a plan so that we can work towards your goals, which may or may not change, and maneuver life.
Right.
So they really reinforced it. And there was a financial planner, they're a team of 2, and there's a financial planner, and she's very knowledgeable in that space.
Yeah. And so what types of things would your plan have you thought about for your financial plan?
Yeah. Again, it's evolved, right? Yeah. So originally I thought, retire as early as possible. But I'm in a job right now that I absolutely adore. Yeah. I am in no hurry to retire. Yeah. I do a lot of volunteer work, and that to me is important. So I just think my working career would evolve to more of a volunteer basis. I have a niece, and so for me it's important that she's well taken care of. However, she's well supported there, so she doesn't need my support per se financially. So I've always been in that single space and kind of making my own money. And so, the idea of saving for somebody else's education is not necessarily important to me. But what is important to me is maximizing the time that I am independent. I love my freedom and independence. And so for that, you need health. And I can do everything I can around health and managing those things. But at the end of the day, if I don't have the right support people around me, and my friends are the same age as I am, so we're all gonna get old together. And as much as I love my mother and she's around still in her 80s, she's not going to be able to take care of me when I'm her age.
Right.
And so this is where the concept of bonus children came into play. And I love this industry. I love helping people. And to see women in this industry that's male dominated, be it financial services or wealth management, makes me happy.
Right.
And so I want to share that excitement because it would have been something I would have done earlier on in my youth. Right. Yeah. And so as you said, I run this mentorship program, and I'm very enthusiastic and engaged in it because I can see how these young females are excited about the value of advice. Right. And if I can have them experience that, then so be it. Yeah. And so I've built relationships with some of these young women and adopted them. Yeah. And they think, oh my gosh, I'm so thankful for your help, your guidance, your willingness to connect me.
Well, you really invest in them, right? At an early age, you really invest in them, and you're truly passionate about seeing them succeed and go on to do great things. So,
and I had that experience to be able to get understand mentorship early on. And so for me, if I can help connect them, it doesn't cost me anything, and I get to share in their excitement. Right. And I told them, I said, and the cost for you is you just need to take care of me when I start, losing my mind and I'm in a home and nobody's visiting me, because that's.
So what I think that's interesting that you've covered off is we've just talked about financial planning, but you'll notice we didn't have a questionnaire. We didn't talk about a bunch of numbers, or we didn't go into, what stocks, but you mentioned a number of things. You mentioned your health. So as a wealth advisor, things that we start to think of are, well, what about insurances? Do you have money in case you end up in a long-term care facility? Or if you want to be independent at your home longer, what are the costs associated with that? Talked about volunteering. Well, what does that look like? How much time would you spend volunteering? It's probably going to have an impact on your expenses because you're out volunteering. You're probably not out spending money or traveling and things like that.
That's right.
So it's amazing when we talk about financial planning. Oftentimes, women will say, "Well, I don't want to get into that numbers. I'm not sure." But it's that what you've just covered is a big chunk of financial planning.
Absolutely.
And you're able to articulate what is valuable, like what is valuable to you.
That's right. I'll be honest, though, it didn't come to me in a light bulb situation the first time I met that full service brokerage advisor.
It's a lot of conversations and over time. And as you said, it changed.
And see, I went through the planning process indirectly because it ended up being a series of shorter meetings that was built on basic information they had. Right. And then I added to it. And, they planted interesting questions.
Right.
How do you spend your vacation? Where do you get, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do? Those were questions.
Well, knowing the values that you mentioned at the very beginning as well, being conservative, you never gamble.
Yes.
And probably when you do a financial plan, you have the mindset of being much more conservative. You want to make sure there's lots of buffer there for those what if scenarios, right?
And they tell me that all the time. Like they say, Tanya, like you're not enjoying life to the full extent that you could.
Right.
And so you don't need to call us if you want to buy those new pairs of shoes.
Right.
Right. And so this is where they encourage me to enjoy the wealth that I've saved. And that I stick to my disciplines and emotional management because I am a true client.
Yeah.
And they know that because I turn into a complete emotional mess when I start to lose money because it's a flashback to that gambling situation.
Right.
Well, it brings up a question I wanted to ask. So it sounds from everything you've said, Tanya, it sounds like financial independence is obviously very important to you.
Big deal.
And continues to be. So what would you say is your, I don't want to say strategy, but let's just say like decision. What do you think is the best decision you've made to make sure you ensure or to ensure that you still have that financial independence? Like, for example, was it getting into the stock? Was it hiring a wealth advisor? Was it or is it having perhaps like a mentor yourself, right? What do you think was a pivotal moment or the best decision you think you had made to ensure that financial independency? Like if someone was to listen to you right now, right, and they said, what was the most important thing for you to attain that financial, what propelled you the most? What would you say it was?
It all depends on age, because the only thing that our youngest generation, or the biggest thing that our youngest generation has in terms of taking care of their own financial future is time.
Right.
And so, I'm thankful that I opened up a bank account early on and I understood the importance of money when I was 10 as opposed to 50.
That's very important.
And so I learned the importance of saving early on and the understanding, because I did go to business school, about compound interest.
Yeah.
And I also learned over my career that I don't manage money. Like if I'm not going to do that, then I need to hire somebody who is good at that.
Right.
And then it morphed into the importance of planning because again, I moved from more that transactional to full relationship, what's important to me. And as a woman, it's less about my rate of return and more about my experiences and my meaning to money.
Right. Right.
And the best advice is take care of your health, because if you don't have your health, you have nothing. Right?
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. So you got to invest in yourself too.
Yes.
Tania, that was wonderful. And it was really touching for me to actually hear the story from the beginning. And you can see that last comment was, it all went back to the very beginning. It was having that experience and having those conversations so early really did shape your path. It continues to. So
and it's even if you're not in your 20s or 30s and you haven't had that discipline, it's never too late.
Yep.
I agree.
And like I said, I'm emotional when the pandemic happened. I'm like, I don't usually do this. I know I'm in the industry, but I'm having a panic attack, right? So I don't know if I'm going to have enough money. And he was able to talk me off the ledge.
Right.
And his partner, she, because I've got a man and a woman, was also able to manage my emotions. And so, that is human nature.
Yes, it is. It is. Well, thanks a million, Tania. That was a wonderful, and thank you for
Tania.
sharing that. That's
If it
amazing.
help anybody else, then so be it.
Yes, thank you. Till next time.